Coaching sagas continuing across college football across the country. None as strange or unexpected or high profile as this one involving Brian Kelly. Of course, the departure from Notre Dame to LSU. We got Nathan Erbach on the line from Golden Homers podcast. Also breaks it down for us on the Voice of College Football Notre Dame postgame. James Rowe from Barroom Sports Talk as well. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing all right. Just,
well, James, since we didn't hear from you yesterday concerning the sudden news, we'll get your take first and foremost in regards to your thoughts about Brian Kelly's decision.
Oh, my first thought is why. I mean, first of all, why with the timing? Why with everything that Kelly has done for the program? And it's just I'm in literal shock. It just makes no sense to me why he would do such a thing. But then again, he did this once before with Cincinnati. So it's one of those, I should have probably seen this one coming. But this whole thing just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Forget money for a second, forget facilities, recruiting footprint, all of that. Could it be as simple as, and I base this just on a few things I've gathered online, could it be as simple as it's been 12 years and I just need a change, I need a challenge, I need a breath of fresh air?
Possibly. But, I mean, considering the type of program Notre Dame is, he could have won a national championship here. That's what it comes down to. And, this is a top 5 program in the country. So it kind of, like I said, it just doesn't make much sense.
And closer today to a national championship that arguably at any time during his tenure, if you add everything up.
Right.
4th ranked recruiting class ready to be signed here for 2022. All right, Nathan, what's the latest on this deal? You had mentioned a few things before we started to record in regards to what could be gathered about. Of course, the coaching staff is the first thing that people think about and that should be concerned about, whether that's what he's forming there at LSU or leaving behind at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, when we talked last night, myself and Ben mentioned that, Freeman was sort of getting some traction in regards to possibly being the head coach in Notre Dame. I still think that that's, very likely, if not going to be the next head coach. I mean, but there's obviously some other options out there. I mean, Luke Fickell has to be someone that people realize is a legitimate candidate. There's even been smoke that Tommy Rees could get at least an interview. I don't know if that's exactly the approach that Notre Dame wants to take, considering how young he is overall. I mean, I know Freeman and him probably have very similar experience in regards to their careers so far, but Freeman is 6 years older and I think has a little bit more of a proven track record of success as well. And of course, a lot of it comes down to recruiting too. And I think if you keep Freeman as the head coach, and maybe this is a short-sighted viewpoint to an extent, but you keep Freeman as the head coach and you're probably not worrying about your 2022 and 2023 classes as much, which, to your point, Mark, just that's arguably as important as making sure that this head coach is going to be a hit regardless, because it's hard to be a hit when you lose all of your players in the process. No matter how good of a coach you are. And I'm at least personally of the opinion that Freeman is going to be a rising star or is a rising star right now and is going to be a very good head coach down the line, regardless of where he's at.
James, where do you stand on the balancing act that may need to be in play in regards to taking your time, getting the coach that you want versus, again, to Nathan's point, securing a recruiting class?
I think honestly they hired Marcus Freeman in anticipation of when Kelly retired that he would take over as the head coach. So I think there's always having his input for this recruiting class as well. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know the full how that all that dynamic will work right now, but at the same point, I feel pretty confident that that they brought on Freeman to do some recruiting as well as now, I guess, becoming the head coach.
Absolutely. All right. I think I posed this question to Nathan last night and to Ben as well, James. Is part of the disappointment or part of the bitterness, resentment, whatever phrase or terminology you want to put on it concerning your own personal feelings and also the fan base, has to do with losing a coach that you believe is one of the top coaches in the country, and that being the loss, or just simply the loss being, why are we being discarded for another program when it's never happened to Notre Dame before? You know, we can list the 5 programs basically in that range in the country that we never expected somebody would leave to go anywhere but the NFL.
I'm not sure if I really have a good enough answer because I just don't understand. That's, LSU is a great program in the SEC, but at the same point, it doesn't come with the same territory that Notre Dame has, being as widespread as it is across the country with the brand and everything. And then all the recruiting that he could get from across the whole entire country. I don't know. I mean, whether this was just to, satisfy something that he wants to do, whether it has to do with his frustrations with getting facilities done with staff or even getting a new stadium, from what I've heard. I think right now all this is just speculation, but I don't know what the true answer is.
So I don't disagree with anything that you've stated. I also enjoy my role of playing the other side, which would be 3 national championships at LSU since 2003. Much like what was talked about with Lincoln Riley being tied to LSU in the argument over which is a better program, one of them consistently wins, Oklahoma/Notre Dame. The other one wins more sporadically, but when they do, they've reached the summit 3 times in the last 18 years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a very valid point overall, Mark. And I don't think anybody's arguing really that it might be easier to win a national championship at LSU, at least in today's college football landscape. But it does go back to a lot about, just what you said last night and today. It is unprecedented for someone to leave Notre Dame in the fashion that Kelly did. I mean, there is an argument to be made, and I think Jack Swarbrick, Notre Dame's athletic director, mentioned this in the press conference today, that guys don't usually stay at Notre Dame, that much longer than what Kelly did. I mean, I think right now he's the second longest tenured coach in the history of Notre Dame. Has been there longer than a lot of the head coaches that won multiple national championships. So, but none of those guys, at least from my knowledge, I'd have to kind of look back on some of the history, from my knowledge, left for a program to, and I think it's more of a surface level thing. Like on the surface, it looks like he left to for his role to be a little bit easier. But then again, I mean, another thing that Jack Swarbrick kind of mentioned in his press conference today was that there have been some, subtle hints and things that Kelly has done in recent years and, even somewhat recently, the last couple weeks that kind of pointed towards him just wanting maybe a change. And I think that goes back to something you said a little bit earlier. So it wasn't necessarily the idea that LSU is easier or LSU is, going to win a national championship in the next 5 years with Brian Kelly, but it was just something new for him and his family. Maybe he was getting a little bit bored at Notre Dame. And then I think what James said is also very true. And I think this is part of the reason is that there were probably some frustrations in regards to facilities and other things like that. But I do think that was maybe second to some of these other points.
I'm going to continue to fire questions, but I want both of you to feel comfortable. Just if you think we need to go another direction or you have some points to make, just keep talking and just take us there. James, we talked about this, Nathan and I and Ben last night, that Brian Kelly does not strike me as an LSU head coach. I could see him at USC. I could see him at Michigan. I could see him just based on, his his background, where he's lived, where he's coached. It just doesn't seem like a fit. And maybe that was an LSU intent, that they needed a level of credibility there, not just on the field, but in running a program, running a clean program that they haven't had with their last two coaches, Ed Ogeron and Les Miles. So that could be it. With Swarbrick, did he give any indication as to what type of coach they are looking for, what avenue they're looking to go down?
I mean, I didn't see the press conference, but from what I read, maybe it was just because I didn't watch it. I didn't see it, but I think considering all the rumors and supposedly one Notre Dame former player saying that it's going to be Freeman, my guess is that they've already made a decision.
So who's your choice? Who's your reasonable preference?
Oh, Marcus Freeman, 100%. I mean, obviously there's talk about Luke Fickell or Matt Campbell, and honestly, I'd be all for Luke Fickell considering the job he's done here in Cincinnati. But, you know, ever since I've seen what Freeman has done this year, I'm 100% on that board.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I watched the press conference earlier this morning, at least Pacific time. I think it was 10 a.m. Eastern. I mean, he mentioned a few things. I mean, obviously, I think first and foremost, Notre Dame needs to find a fit for Notre Dame, which ties into guys like, you know, the three that have sort of been mentioned, at least today, you know, by reliable sources in Freeman, Reese possibly getting an interview, and then of course Luke Fickell, who is Catholic. So there's a kind of an obvious fit there with Fickell, Freeman, and Reese. Obviously, Reese graduated from Notre Dame, played at Notre Dame, has coached at Notre Dame for the last 5-6 years, whatever it may be. And then Freeman obviously has the experience from this year and was recruited as a Notre Dame athlete, and so kind of went through the recruiting process with Notre Dame as well. So he mentioned fit. He also mentioned having a very CEO style of approach, someone that can continue to bring recruiting success and match, that what they've done in recent years. The one thing that caught my eye the most is that in past years, he always mentioned guys that could come in, and rebuild a program. Obviously, they don't really need to rebuild a program right now, and he was very adamant about that. So it wasn't like he needed a coach that has proven that. That's where I think people started getting this idea in their head that maybe Freeman is, all but locked up per se. And then he also was pretty adamant about how it didn't need to be a former head coach or a current head coach. He was asked that specifically. He said no. And then even when asked about the interim head coaching title, essentially his direct quote was, "If we don't feel the need to have an interim head coach, and if we do, that person will not be considered for the position moving forward." I feel like if he were to come out and say Freeman is our interim head coach, then there would have been a likelihood that he could possibly move into that role. But with him saying that our program is stable from a coaching standpoint, even without Kelly, at least until it's figured out, I don't know. It just seemed like there were a lot of kind of, and again, this is a guessing game to an extent, but it just seemed that there were a lot of different holes in there that led to the idea that, Freeman or Reese in this instance could actually become that head coach, and it's not just a speculation game.
Nathan Erbach, Golden Homers podcast. We got James Rowe, also from Bar Room Sports Talk. So James, we appreciate you stopping by and joining the conversation. Nathan, you as well. Brian Kelly out at Notre Dame. Who's next? We shall see. Guys, again, appreciate the insight, the information.